in a second.
Hello from Brussels. Let me welcome you to the final day of this year's edition of EUISS Lab, hosted by the Center for European Policy Studies, CEPS. Over the past week, we've been actively discussing how should future of Europe look like. Will we have more resilient health sector? Will we make to address climate change? Will EU's recovery plan work? And how to seek immunity in the post-COVID world? These were the questions which were discussed by distinguished speakers, Nobel Prize laureates, high-level officials from the EU institutions, respectable academics. Yet at the end of the week, we've reserved this very special session to inquire one important thing. Do the policymakers today understand the needs of tomorrow? And who better to ask this question than young people? So today we go over to youth to learn how they see their future, how they want to shape it. With these questions, we have with us 30 brilliant young thinkers who over the past week were busy with Foresight sessions. They were visualizing the future of Europe and were building scenarios for future of EU democracy. This high-level roundtable marks the end of young thinkers' activities over the past week and brings these young people together with the top EU officials and distinguished academics. By bringing young voices in the heart of public debates today, this event contributes to the Conference on the Future of Europe. We have had very exciting session for the next hour and a half. I am Tinatin Akhvlediani. Call me just Tina. I'm a researcher and the coordinator of Young Thinkers Initiative at CEPS, and I will be moderating this event today. Now, a few words about our agenda and speakers. Well, we have big questions today to discuss, and young people are speaking. So we had to make sure to bring the most distinguished guests for today's discussion with young thinkers. And who better than the Vice President of the European Commission, Maroš Šefčovič, first ever college member to be in charge of strategic foresight. The Vice President first will give us food for thought with his keynote speech on future of Europe in post-COVID world. Then we will give the floor to young thinkers who will reflect on this by presenting their views on the challenges and opportunities of today and solutions for tomorrow. And then we will put this all together in a lively discussion with a high-level panel who will comment on the proposals of young thinkers. At the panel, the Vice President will be joined by distinguished academics, Deputy Director of the EU Institute for Security Studies and Director of CEPS. To make the discussion even more interactive, we will also have a Q&A session. I very much encourage all of you to raise your questions throughout the webinar. Apart from young thinkers and participants of CEPS EUISS Lab, we also wanted to engage the wider public who are watching our live stream on CEPS YouTube channel and who follow us on social media. So we will collect the questions from our social media subscribers on Twitter. So tag CEPS Think Tank and pass the questions to us by using hashtags #OverToYouth. Together with my colleagues, we'll collect these questions from Twitter and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. As we have quite busy agenda ahead, I have an agreement with our distinguished speakers that I will be strict with timing and I will let them know when their time is up. With this note, let me open the floor for the keynote speech by the European Commission Vice President for Interinstitutional Relations and Foresight, Maroš Šefčovič. Vice President, we are honored to have you with us, to have the first ever college member in charge of strategic foresight. And we're very much looking forward to learn from you how the future of Europe will look like. What are EU's future-oriented policies and how this would enable young people to meet and overcome the challenges they will face tomorrow. Vice President, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tina. Good morning to everyone, and congratulations to CEPS for organizing such a future-oriented session with the young people. I've been participating in the CEPS discussions many times before, but this is of particular quality, and I know that you had very interesting debate sessions, and I'm very glad that the young people are so involved in something which is really oriented at the future, like foresight and planning what we can do better together. I would start with the fact that at every generation there is kind of life-changing moment. I mean, for me, for example, it was the fall of Berlin Wall, or when I first time, probably in your age, could cross actually the river Danube and go to see our Austrian friends. Because until then I could look through the barbed wire on cars, houses, and the lights on the highways. But I would say the established understanding at that time in former Czechoslovakia was that we would never cross that river, and we would never get over that barrier. I think for my parents it was probably 1968, and they've been extremely disappointed that the Prague Spring didn't bring them that freedom they hoped for, and they kind of be locked in that iron embrace of the normalization and another couple of decades of the regime they didn't like. And I think for you it's even more telling, because you're actually living the times when you see how the life and the world around you is changing. I mean, every day we have no new proofs about the climate change changing the way how the world functions. Every day you see how the new digital technologies are bringing something new, for better or for worse. And therefore, I think that this decade actually will be very important for the rest of the century, for the place of Europe in the global community, and also for the decisions to be taken, which would indeed shape the future of the mankind. And therefore, I very much appreciate the possibilities to talk to you, to talk to the young generation, which will be responsible for carrying the torch further and for developing the policies of which founding stones we are laying right now. I think that we all know that it's very difficult to predict the future, but we all know and we learned the lesson that we better be prepared for it. And therefore, the work with different scenarios, different optionalities is key. And when I was preparing for my address to you, I came across the very good quote from the US civil rights leader, Ralph Abernathy, who said, "I don't know what the future may hold, but I know who holds the future." And the answer is key, that's you. So therefore, it's extremely appreciated that you are interested, you're active, and you want to be part of this big change. Tina rightly pointed out that my boss, President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, had a good foresight to actually nominate the first commissioner responsible for the foresight, because I think that we need this more than ever, because we feel that if it comes to the policy making, decisions taking, or to the legislative proposals to be put on the table, they have to be much more future oriented than in the past. And we have to somehow factor in all that changes and transformations which are taking place now, we can say every day. The first lessons we got the last year was very harsh one. And we realized, because of COVID-19, what kind of new phenomenon it brought to our everyday lives. From one side, that it served as a huge accelerator, again, of good and the bad things. We saw how from one day into another, we had to emerge into the online world and do the things we never believe we'll be doing over the computer, talking to our loved ones, not coming to the office, learning online. And this was something which was unthinkable just a few years ago. Then, of course, we have also seen how the COVID-19 was a great divider. It divided the families. It brought a lot of tension into our societies. And we see right now what kind of tensions because of vaccines or economic aftershock there are among the countries. And lessons for Europe was that we have to focus not only being more green and more digital, but we also have to be more resilient. And therefore, the resilience actually became such a strategic compass for all our policies we do in the European Union, simply being better prepared for the future. So we look at the resilience from 4 different angles. We took the social and economic aspects, green, digital, and we also wanted to compare Europe to the big outside players. And we just simply put the different data sets together just to assess how resilient we are and what we need to do. And I think this is especially important right now where we are just launching this new next generation EU financial facility of 750 billion euros, because I think it's very important to measure if we do things right, and if after we would have invested all the money, if it helps our resilience. For me, very important lesson of working with the dashboards on resilience was that there was clear understanding that today we have to look at new way how to measure growth. Simply that we have to go beyond GDP, because very often in the traditional concept of the GDP, you kind of attach the growth to the activities which are otherwise very detrimental to the future of the planet or to public health, and has a lot of negative consequences. So therefore, I think that to go beyond the GDP and to learn how we should measure what actually is healthy growth, which contributes not only to growing the economy, but also preservation of planet, public health, and overall well-being, I think will be very important. And then I think that your generation will definitely live out of this new concept. I think another topic I would mention before I conclude, because I know that Tina wants to be very precise on time, is the huge challenge which would be ahead of your generation. And this would be something what I would describe as a need for permanent upskilling and reskilling. I think what we see today, I'm also probably, you know, the head of European Battery Alliance, and I'm very glad that within 3.5 years, we completely changed the paradigm, and now the Europe is #1 destination for investment into the batteries, and we actually are getting them 3 times more than in China. So the industrial policy in Europe is possible, and we can really do the profound and fast changes. But when you talk to the industry, what is the major challenge for them right now? This is to have 800,000 people properly trained before 2025. Because they need mechanical engineer, they need chemical engineers, they need software developers, they need designers who are up to the task of transforming completely the transport sector in Europe and in the world, and put it on completely new rails and new wheels, which are called sustainability, and put in place the concept of competitive sustainability on which we want to compete, because we think that in this particular case, price competition is also outdated. Last word on how to communicate better. I'm very glad that we have this discussion under the conference on future of Europe. And I think these are exactly the debates which we need to have on the grand scale and this big debate in European Union, because we need to talk about the things which are interesting for you. And I know that this is the future, these are the jobs, this is the climate change. Not everyone is all the time interested in institutional issues. And therefore, I hope that we will use these new possibilities to discuss and talk with the young people in the most efficient and professional way. And therefore, I'm very thrilled about our digital platform, because there the language barrier is dismantled. We are using artificial intelligence for automatic translation, so Estonians can talk to Portuguese and Slovak can talk with Italians in their own language. So to conclude, once again, thank you very much for your invitation, for the possibility to address you, and I'm of course very interesting to listen to you, to your questions, and to debate with other panelists. Thank you very much, Tina.
Many thanks, Vice President. It was very inspiring for us, and many thanks for sharing your personal experiences. This is priceless. So we have now the buzzword resilience, focus on digital green transformation, permanent upskilling, and better improved communication. Quite a lot food for thought, and we keep our curiosity to learn more about the outcomes of Commission's work on strategic foresight. But well, in the meantime, young thinkers done their own homework. They've done their own foresight for over the past week, and they came here today to actually present their proposals and recommendations. So what they were doing, they were engaged in guided foresight sessions. They were building possible scenarios for future of EU democracy, well, drawing on the main internal and external factors and drivers of European integration, also disintegration and global governance. And these youngsters were also busy with tech solutions. Well, how would it be otherwise? They tested an innovative mobile app COCTEAU to visualize the future of EU democracy. And so today they bring everything together and they're here to present their proposals and recommendations for the role of citizens in designing the future of Europe and European democracy. They're very excited that the Vice President is listening and our distinguished academics are also listening. So with no more introduction, let me invite young thinkers to present their proposals and recommendations. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And first and foremost, thank you to the Vice President for the opening speech and Abernathy's quote about who holds the future, which links perfectly with what we're about to present, especially given that today the G7 finance ministers are discussing a global minimum corporate tax. And I think our presentation couldn't be held at a more timely occasion. So I am Dario. I grew up in Portugal. I have Russian family in Sweden and in Italy. And I'm a graduate from the University of Oxford, working as a risk analyst at the moment, and one day I hope to see income inequality eradicated.
Hi everyone, my name is Alliance and I'm an electrical engineer working in biotech for the Spanish National Research Council. I have roots from Rwanda, but I grew up in Norway, and my dream is to see a future with positive use of e-governance.
So our analysis of the future of the EU that we'll be sharing with you today was very much shaped by our Foresight scenario. And this was characterized by weak states plagued by high debt and strong multinational corporations, which increasingly replace the role of the state, all of which leads to a fragmented world with regional inequalities. Now, to preempt this dystopian future, we propose to leverage the EU's biggest competitive advantage, its social state model. Our recommendations employ trends and policies which we already observe today across Europe for higher employee and local participation, and tries to bring these trends from the fringes into the institutionalized policy mainstream. On our way to reaching this end goal, however, we find both opportunities for reform as well as challenges to Europe's social state, which in itself constitutes the primary opportunity that we identify. So on the one hand, the business community's willingness to go beyond producing goods and services for profits and its focus towards stakeholder value shows there's a desire for socially responsible business. And equally, the strong industrial culture of worker activism make Europe the prime candidate for bringing labor unions into the digital era. And I think that together, these can counteract the undue influence of multinational big tech corporations, the main challenge looming over Europe. It's safe to say that to an extent, the EU missed the tech wave. ByteDance, Amazon, Netflix, Alibaba, Google, none of these are European companies, and this leads to a difference in values. When push comes to shove, can Europe count on Alibaba or Facebook to respect European labor values? And how will it influence corporate decisions? So the long-term question is, how do we incentivize these foreign companies to protect and respect European values when operating in the EU market?
Next slide, please. And the answer is by supporting employee and region-centric business models. In a world increasingly dependent on data-driven technology, it is crucial to emphasize the role of employees in the development of these digital models. Hence, we propose that, particularly in foreign data-driven technological companies, local employee representation is ensured. This can be done by two mechanisms. One, increasing the employee representation to ensure the respect of European labor rights, such as working hours, subsidies, and income disparities. Secondly, increase of local representation, so making space for competent local NGOs as well as community and municipality representatives should be able to defend, for example, protection of local environmental resources and abstain the restructure of urban environments. Next slide, please. The strength of our recommendation is that it draws on existing trends. So we want to take existing employee and region-centric business models and institutionalize them on a European level. There is an ongoing movement to reshape company values from shareholder value to stakeholder values. This has even been proposed in the European Commission's Industry 5.0 strategy. So a means to institution like this is, for example, requiring up to 50% board representation by employee and regional representatives for companies of 2,000 employees or above. which is already put in place in Germany under the co-determination law. This employee and region-centric policy will ensure the integration of environmental, social, and governance commitments as KPIs in corporate performance reporting. Next slide, please. So what is the next move? Due to the lack of the European companies in the front line of the global digital revolution, in the future, there might be fewer incentives for foreign companies to protect and respect European values when operating in the EU market. Therefore, we think that the EU must make employee and region-centric business models the norm across Europe. Just like the EU has pioneered the fight for data privacy, it is now time for the EU to leverage its biggest competitive advantage, their social model. How? By being a role model in paving the new way for leadership in the digital era. This is Group 1, and thank you so much for listening to our recommendation.
Thank you. Now I'll be taking over to introduce Group 2. Firstly, let me introduce myself. My name is Tinatin. I'm from Turkey and currently a senior student of political science and public administration at Middle East Technical University. I guess Luca will be introducing himself when his own time comes. So firstly, I'll be talking about our forecasting exercise, which focused on the overarching issue of overregulation preventing citizens from participating fully in social and political life. And as you could see on the previous slide, we argue that the EU is only as strong as its citizens. So it's very important to inform them and educate them fully. And the key challenges, as you can see on this slide that we identified, is a distance between EU decision-making and citizens' lives, which contributes to the other challenge of the lack of knowledge, interest, and trust with regards to EU politics that citizens feel. And these both are exacerbated by the third challenge of bureaucratic complexity of EU decision-making. And these all contribute to the more overarching challenge of low citizen participation and trust, as we found within our scenario. But of course, these challenges are not just confined to our scenario, they are also quite relevant for today. And then there are, of course, opportunities that we found to correspond to these challenges. So with regards to the challenge of distance, we see that new technologies can help overcome this distance and bridge this gap. And with regards to the lack of knowledge, interest, and trust, as well as that of bureaucratic complexity, we think that this could be addressed by new means of communication, increasing the accessibility of information and education. So these opportunities and challenges have led us to come up with certain proposals for solutions, especially those targeting young people. And Luca will now be talking more about this.
Yes, hi, so I'm Luca De Boni. I'm half Italian, half Russian, and I'm a PhD researcher at the German Institute for Global and Area Studies here in Hamburg. Now, to address these challenges and make use of the opportunities that have just been presented, we would like to present two very concrete key recommendations to you for citizen engagement in the EU that would focus on the role of information and communication. The first of which would be to set up an EU support program within the framework of the European Innovation Council that would fund innovative citizen media projects. This fund would provide 20 to 30 grants per year to citizen media projects, and these grants would be distributed based on an open competition and a public vote in a process that we would like to call the Eurovision for citizen media. But what we mean by citizen media is projects that aim to involve young people, students, for instance, who have interesting ideas for media projects, not necessarily only professional journalists. And what we mean by innovative media is not necessarily setting up local newspapers that few people will end up actually reading, but rather to have projects that aim to encourage the use of social media or digital tools to create integrated and innovative media approaches. For instance, for YouTube channels, podcasts, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram accounts, and so on. An important criteria of these projects should be that they're educational and informative, and that they aim to provide information about EU projects and how these impact local lives. Now, we believe that this kind of local media projects can really help bridge the distance between EU decision makers and citizens' lives, and thereby can contribute to helping reinstate trust towards EU politics. Our second recommendation is far more simple, and it involves simply making the EU's websites more accessible and more easily navigatable. We talked about a challenge of the bureaucratic complexity of the EU, and this is a complexity that is completely reflected in the EU's website, which even to those who are quite familiar with the EU remains very, very difficult to navigate. We think that this is not a point that doesn't really need to be developed much more than that, and it can stay as simple as it is, because we think that sometimes simpler is simply better. And this was group 2, and we would like to thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. On behalf of our group, Group 2, I would like to thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. My name is Ellen Schiffer. I am from Sweden, and I'm very happy to be part of this initiative. So throughout this week, our group has worked with an optimistic foresight scenario where in 2050, there's a push for open and innovative government, as well as an increase in inclusion of citizens in governmental decision-making. With this said, we have identified a few key opportunities and challenges, as well as a recommendation that my teammate Adam will present later. We believe that there are two main areas that will be important in the future if we have this push for digital democracy. First of all, digital connectivity will be very important. If democracy is going to be more digital, we need to ensure that, first of all, that digital literacy improves across age groups, as well as across all countries and educational backgrounds. Everyone should have access, be able to participate on digital platforms. And with more digital platforms, there's going to be more data collection. Data collection can be a good thing in a way where we can have more data to analyze and in the long term maybe create better public services. But it's also an issue with data collection over who owns your data or who has sovereignty over your data and privacy. And this all ties into a lack of digital infrastructure. So internet is very important in today's society, as we have seen over this last 1.5 years during the pandemic. And even though many EU citizens have access to internet today, we think that the quality of this varies. And that's why we need to ensure that everyone has internet access. The second area we think is important is citizen engagement. So citizen participation should be equal and accessible for all. What we mean by this is that a lot of people may participate in non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, or even political parties, but not everyone wants to do this. So we need to ensure that participation can happen online in some way or form so everyone can participate on their own terms. We also think it is important to emphasize that citizens can be involved in more than just soft policy fields of maybe equality and social policy, maybe have some more voice on strategic issues facing Europe. With that said, this all ties into the last point here about incentivizing citizens with feedback and a transparent process within their connection with the public sector. So with this said, I will hand over to Adam, who will present our suggestion.
Yes, thank you, Ellen. So I'm going to try and be quite terse. I'm conscious that we're maybe running a little bit out of time, and so I'll try and summarize our proposal swiftly. My name is Adam. I'm a native of Ireland and Czechia, and this is our key recommendation for citizen engagement. In essence, we want to create a public space whereby EU citizens will be linked directly with the legislative process which governs their entire existence. Now, we're conscious that as AI progresses, that this is getting better and better in the European Union, but it could use an extra kick, we believe. If there could be such a platform that links the EU citizens to the representatives in the European Parliament, and they could play a role in the legislative process upon the principles of an existing EU initiative, the European Citizens Initiative, then this would allow them to have a horizontal relationship between the Parliament and the legislative process. What this would mean, of course, is that there would need to be a minimal benchmark of support from citizens for initiatives before they're discussed at the legislative level. What would that mean? Perhaps not the 1 million signatories that is required under the Citizens Initiative as it stands, but maybe several thousand, something that indicates a minimal benchmark, which would indicate to the representatives that this is something that is worth pursuing. That is not to say, of course, and this is going to be my final statement, this is not to say that these initiative would be binding upon the politicians. It would not mean that the politicians would be beholden to the whims of their citizens, but rather it would be indicative. It would allow an indication of the citizens, of the electorate, that is, of their areas of priority, and this would allow a more universal engagement of the EU citizens in this process. So you have heard the recommendations of Group 3. Thank you for your attention, and leave the floor for Group 4.
Good morning. My name is Michał Gulczyński, and I'm Bocconi's student at the PhD level. And our proposal is entitled "Leaving No Voices Behind." We propose solutions for a world with many societal gaps and lack of empathy. The main challenge that we see is that decisions are made more and more often by technocrats, expert judges, agencies at the supranational level, which is far from the citizens. More and more topics and positions are excluded from normal political debate. This creates fertile ground for polarization because many people believe that their dissenting voices and opinions that often do not agree with the mainstream are not taken into account. In effect, for example, the group of European conservatives and reformists is organizing an alternative conference on the future of Europe. So we have parallel debates instead of one public debate with many different opinions. We believe we could be united in diversity of opinions as well. So we see two opportunities. The conference on the future of Europe, with hopefully plenty of offline meetings and plenty of opportunities for expressing different opinions also for the people who usually do not engage with the EU, and digital tools that collect diverse opinions and let people engage with such points of view with which they do not necessarily agree. Now, Ines will explain the details of our proposal.
Hi everyone, I'm Ines. I'm from Spain, doing a master's in the Netherlands. And as Michal has neatly explained, our goal was to find a way for dissenting voices to feel included into the European debate and to make sure that all voices are not only heard, but included and recognized in both the discussion and in the outcome of such discussions. Therefore, we propose the inclusion of a chapter on dissenting opinions within the text of final decisions and conclusions, so that the non-majority perspectives are also reflected. We consider that it will be useful in the context of the conference on the future of Europe, namely in the conclusions of every session. And moreover, it will also be useful to include it in more general terms at some stage in the legislative procedure at the EU level. Secondly, we acknowledge that we as citizens tend to isolate ourselves in the ideological bubbles within our group of friends, family, especially in social media. So we are generally not exposed to other views. So our democratic skills are not as developed as they could be. So we propose to foster a discussion and make debates public and open again. We propose the inclusion of democratic skills within the curriculum at some point of the education system. And also, we could also foster the use of platforms that are designed for such purpose, such as COCTEAU, because we have seen that it is an easy and a relaxed way to connect with others and engage in discussions to conclusions. So that was it. Thank you for your attention. And if you do not agree, we are happy to include your opinion in the chapter on dissenting opinions.
Many thanks, Ines. Many thanks to all of you for tuning in from basically all over Europe and beyond. Thanks a lot for your hard work. These are big issues. Well, institutionalizing European labor rights in big tech, Eurovision for citizen media, collaborative system for legislative governance, and leaving no voices behind. Well, impossible mission to cover all this within 5-minute presentations. Very well done. And I think another impossible mission for our panelists to actually comment on them, but we have a very high-level panel, so only them could probably comment on these big issues. Now, together with the Vice President, we have on board Deputy Director of the EU Institute for Security Studies, Florence Gaub, and Research Director of CEPS, Cinzia Alcidi. I thank you all very much for your time to be with us today. Now, I will go to each of the panelists with a question, and then you will have around 3-4 minutes for your comments. And then we will go back to young thinkers for their brief reactions. Now, let me just start with an order of the presentations. And let me go to Cinzia with my first question. I mean, Cinzia, you are actively publishing on EU economic policy and EU governance. So I thought it would be good kind of to have your takes on the proposals of young thinkers on leveraging the EU's biggest competitive advantage via a social model. How feasible does it seem to you to institutionalize European labor rights in big tech companies, EU's Industry 5.0? I mean, tell us more.
Thanks very much, Tina, and just allow me 30 seconds to share with you actually how pleased I am to be today with you. We started a Young Thinkers initiative in the EUISS Lab 5 years ago, 2016. But it's really the first time that I see a concrete output coming out of it and so much involvement. And I think that two things made the difference. The first one is the team, the CEPS team. I'm so proud of you all today. Tina, Agnes, Moritz, Tommaso, Izzy, and the others who really made this possible. So thanks very much to all. But I should also say that part of the preparation of what you have heard today was made possible leveraging on the current Horizon 2020 that CEPS is running. So in this sense, we really tried to make the best out of it. Now, let me now move to the content. Let me say first one word, which I think it's quite important on the scenario that Dario and Alliance thought about. And basically it's a scenario in which multinationals may actually replace nation states in some roles. And this is something that to some extent in some specific areas is already happening. So imagining a future where actually this trend continues and evolves is a sensible one. So in this sense, I think it's very much appreciated. And let me highlight a couple of points why this is important. So if you look at multinationals and in particular big tech companies, in some cases, the size of their annual income is comparable to the GDP of a country. So just to give you a sense of how influential they can be. The second aspect is that large multinational companies can tap into the potential of frontier technologies, which they control and which can have access before anyone, even before it is regulated. So in this sense, they have a very strong comparative advantage relative to nation states. And this, we may end up in a situation whereby companies which are driven by private interest and looking for profits actually overshadow, if you want, the role that a nation state can play. And this, of course, raises challenges and also poses risk to the collective good, which in principle in democracies should be represented by a government. Which express the will, at least of the majority. So this is a bit of the starting point. Now, in terms of solutions, I think your solutions have 3 strengths. The first one is that you try to look at the specificity of the EU, and you want to focus on it and try to leverage on it, the EU social model. So I think this is a critical approach. The second one, you don't ask for money, which I think, because it's always an easy solution, the EU should give us more money. The third one is that you put at the center, and this is for me, the way I read your suggestion, people's engagement, which I think is fundamental. And the meeting we're having today and the Conference of Europe can play a really central role. Now, on where I see that actually there may be challenges and that there may be obstacles, just 2 points. The EU social model cannot be taken for granted. This is something that we need to fight for, if you want. We need to defend it. And each of us needs to take responsibility. The EU social model is based on a model where workers are protected And basically, protection can materialize with unemployment benefit with support, which basically is a form of redistribution of resources. So basically, everyone needs to be responsible and contribute to generate the resources that are necessary for it. And it's about having certain standards at the workplace and certain quality jobs, which are usually defended by trade unions. But if you look at recent trends, membership in trade union has been declining drastically. So in this sense, what can make the difference is really the engagement of citizens. Now, another challenge, think of the telework. Teleworking is becoming more and more used, especially in certain sectors. If you can telework, you can be based anywhere in the world. You don't need to come to CEPS in Brussels and be under the Belgian law to do your work. How can we do, or how can we make sure that actually everyone has the same rights, same standard applied to all workers? Third and last point, and here I close, is about jurisdiction. So to what extent actually the EU can impose a certain standard, certain rights, certain regulation on companies which are not based in the EU. Now, in this, I have to say the Commission has been quite active in promoting non-financial reporting or sustainability reporting. So there was actually a revision of the directive just a few weeks ago, whereby companies are actually must comply with disclosure of information about how they deal with social and environmental challenges. This goes exactly in the direction you were speaking about, where actually stakeholders become important in the sense of contributing to shape the main policies and the main priorities of the companies, but also can tell the company what is the impact of their choices. So there are movements in this direction, and we have to see how actually we can develop initiatives which are already there in order to face the future challenges. But overall, congratulations for the work that you have done. I'm impressed by the group. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Cinzia. I will then take this opportunity to ask Group 1 if they want to react to Cinzia's very detailed and very useful comments. Anyone?
I think we can react to a few points. Thank you for highlighting them. Firstly, on not taking the EU social model for granted, I think we couldn't agree more. And I think these measures that we're proposing are exactly in the direction of reinforcing it, re-innovating it, especially in light of your second point about trade union membership decreasing. If we observe this, it's time for the European Union to think ahead, to start formulating new mechanisms. And that is where we see the institutionalization of employee rights, employee involvement as a key avenue for such solutions, which leads us to the final point that you mentioned about jurisdiction. And that is arguably the most challenging one. How do you do it with foreign companies that are not based on the EU? And here I would point again toward the G7 meeting that's happening today on corporate tax. It has lots of parallels to the issue that we're talking about here. The difference being it's top down, and what we're proposing is bottom up. But the notion that if you operate in a certain territory, regardless of where you're based, you need to comply with certain standards is an idea that is gaining track, is gaining force, and we believe that could be very easily translated into this context as well.
I would also just like to comment on one thing, which Cinzia said, which was particularly on how can we implement this in the day and age where teleworking is so common. And I think that's where in the recommendation we're giving is to having local NGOs and local representation of organizations, because this means that, for example, you could have almost like local trade unions of people working in the same region. So, for example, if Google and Facebook has operations all across Europe, you would have local representations for every country or even region within that country that would have to be presented within that 50% board representation that we're requiring. And I think that also kind of goes in line with what you were saying, that in the end, to reform the EU social model is a responsibility, is a responsibility for everyone. And on that, I would just like to say thank you, and thank you for your comments, Cinzia.
Many thanks. With this, let us just go to another big issue, so the digital solutions, which young thinkers propose to engage and inform citizens. And well, Vice President already referred to the importance of communication in his keynote speech. Quoting him, he said, there is a language barrier in the communication. And then now looking at the presentations of young thinkers, we saw there the distance between citizens' lives and EU decision-making because of the bureaucratic complexity in the EU decision-making. So to tackle this, they've suggested to have Eurovision for citizen media, grants for citizen-led media, and a collaborative system for legislative governance. So let me ask to the Vice President, how feasible does this sound to you? Would this tackle the language barrier in the communication?
Thank you very much once again, and also for very impressive presentation and this good-spirited work which led to this brainstorming, excellent PowerPoints, and also very interesting discussion we have so far. So to be very, very concrete, I think that what I think is the most important conclusion for me from this morning, that you are clearly highlighting the fact that if it comes to the information spread, if it comes to the debate, we should go where the citizens are, and we all know that it's not anymore just the traditional media, be it newspapers in the paper form, or be it the traditional television news, because especially the young people who are simply gathering the information from different platforms, and therefore your idea to kind of help this new social media phenomenon, this Eurovision contest for the citizens and media, which would be on this new platform, YouTube, TikTok, or other which are attractive to your generation. I think it's a very interesting one, and I definitely will recommend this idea to work on and to explore from all the aspects to two of my colleagues with whom I am representing the Commission in the Executive Board of the Conference of Future Europe, meaning Vice President Jourova, who is responsible for European democracy, and Vice President Šuica, who is responsible for the conference as such. And I think that that could be a good recommendation also at the end of this Grand Débat Européen, which we have launched on how to interact and communicate, especially with the young generation better. And other suggestions which I would have to you, if it comes to assessment of the websites, to make them simpler, more accessible, and also to improve the way of the digital connectivity with our citizens. I think that what we did over the last year was that we did our utmost to simplify Have Your Safe portal, because myself and I think that I know quite a lot about the EU because I'm working here already for some time, but sometimes difficult to navigate, difficult to find the proper area and to present my comments. So we simplified it, we made it more user-friendly, but I know that this is not done. So I think that it would be interesting to ask your group to do something for ethical hackers are doing for some companies. I think to have your critical comments on, I would say, the major websites of the European Commission, and just to tell us from your perspective, what do you think we should do better, what you don't like, where it is too complicated, how it could be simplified. And I think it would be enormous contributions to the outreach the European Commission wants to do and is trying to do its best, but of course doesn't have always that ability and agility of the new young generation who is already in the category of digital native. So that's my request to you, if you can help us and make concrete suggestions how to simplify our websites, how to improve our have your say portal, and all this, I would say, communication tools we are developing. I would very much appreciate it to do this ethical, not hacking, but ethical, critical thinking about the European website. And it would be, I think, the great contributions to how to improve our outreach to the citizens. And the last concrete suggestions, and of course, I don't know if technically this would be possible. We started this new digital platform, which I said is kind of based also on artificial intelligence, helping us with the interpretations and the translation. And the platform is there. So far, the interest is quite impressive. And we, of course, are going to work on that platform for at least another year. And we will be having conference like this under the umbrella and label on the Conference of Future of Europe. But my feeling already now is that we should keep that platform for continuation of the discussions with the citizens, for people to get used to the platform, to improve it, to perfect it. How can it be compatible with your COCTEAU platform you are developing? Can they be mutually reinforcing? Can they adopt the feature from one into another? And then I think what would be, of course, very useful would be that once we are starting, let's say, the public consultations on the future policies or the future legislative proposals, that we can also kind of enlarge it and to go beyond the traditional consultation of the stakeholders, to kind of put it on this platform that the people, the young people can actually be engaged, interested, and comment. What I found that is the biggest challenge, because we consult widely and the OECD ranks our consultation system to be #1 in the world. But I know from practice that very often this is, especially in our member states, not public knowledge, that you simply do not know that the consultation was open, that you can actually comment on some of the proposals. And very often you have, I would say, the usual suspects who are commenting, and these are the people who are very much interested in what's being happened, but it doesn't reach the outside public. I don't know how to overcoming. I was thinking about to have more public, ads in the local media, national media, but probably the digital world, this type of platform where something is kind of blinking on your screen that the consultation was open, you can engage, you can tell us what you think, I think would be important. And then we are not speaking about, let's say, the number of the participants, because if we in our public consultations see there is a predominant view on one aspect or another, despite the number of the views, we are always taking it into account. And the last innovation we introduced was that now we are always presenting summary assessment and sending it back to the people who've been communicating with us. So there's been a few of the reaction. I agree with you that if you want to have more support for Europe, the people have to understand us better. They have to know how to communicate. There is not so much problem of the democratic deficit, but about the knowledge how to interact with the EU institutions. And if any of this platform or any outreach can help us, I'm all for it. So thank you very much for the great work and very good discussion.
Many thanks, Vice President. I'm sure this visibility and practical questions you've asked, I think young thinkers would find it very possible to further refine their ideas. And I think it's a good moment to actually ask Group 2 and Group 3 if you would like to react to the comments raised here by the Vice President. Please unmute yourself and just join us speaking.
I would be happy to make a comment, if I may. So I'm representing Group 3, and our suggestion was on the engagement of the citizens via a public space. Of course, what we've been told here is entirely valid. Yes, it is true that the European Union, as it stands, engages very, very widely with its citizens, and this is an aspect of the European Union which is to be celebrated. Is going back to the intervention that we heard from Cinzia. The social policies of the European Union are in many ways ahead of their time, and we are not disputing that, but that does not mean that they cannot be further improved upon. as it stands, the European citizens are consulted widely in a sort of a white paper, green paper sort of way, which allows them to engage and to provide their opinions on legislation that is about to be proposed. But actually what we would like to suggest is that the citizens would also play a role in the initiative process. That is to say that they would have the power of initiative to propose legislation that they would like to see enacted. It's a little bit different. Whereas as it stands, they can consult on legislation that has been initiated by other bodies, often the Commission or civil society actors. Why could it not be that citizens themselves, if it garnered a certain level of support, could not propose changes to the European Union that they would like to see themselves? To use an example, so Mr. Šefčovič, you were elected in 2014 with 135,000 preferences votes. I would imagine that of those 135,000, there's a significant number of people who would like to see an elected politician achieve, pursue a given thing in particular, if I make some sense. They have certain preferences that they would like to see implemented. Everybody has an opinion on something that they would like to see changed in the European institutions. And why could it not be that if a certain initiative proposal from a European citizen garnered a certain amount of support, that would then be brought into the legislative process, whether it be in plenary or whether it be at a committee meeting? Now, of course, and I know that I'm taking up a lot of time, so I want to end it here. Of course, it is that we trust in our politicians to make cases on our behalf. We trust in them to kind of blaze their own trail in the legislative process. Of course, this is the case. However, if it were to be that a certain idea garnered enough support, why could it not be that the politicians would then bring this idea to the table on behalf of the citizens that they were elected to represent? Thank you.
If you allow me just to answer, Adam, I know that we are running out of time. Just 2 points. The first one, I'm sure that you heard about the European Citizens Initiative, which was exactly created for this. And I think in this digital world, it's much easier to gather the support and to bring this to the attention of the politicians and public institutions. And we are taking all the initiative very seriously, even if they do not reach the 1 million signatures. So the possibility is there, and I think we should use it. And maybe your generation would be much more apt and fast and agile how to do it. And the second opportunity, this is exactly why the Conference on Future of Europe just launched its works, because the goal is exactly to listen to you, listen to the citizens of the European Union, what you believe should be done on the European level. And all of our institutions agreed from the beginning that we will do the concrete follow-up to the ideas the citizens has presented, of course, with our respective responsibilities. So what is there for the Commission will do, the Council, the Parliament, and all three presidents kind of solemnly pledged that we are going to do that. So there are two opportunities, I think, which could be used. And of course, it would be good to have these excellent and open-minded ideas, as we heard today, also presented in a way which then we can actually work on them. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Vice President. Many thanks for this engaging in the debates and discussion with young thinkers. And also many thanks for flagging the Conference on the Future of Europe, which brings us to the next topic. Leaving no voices behind while engaging in the Conference on the Future of Europe. And we saw that young thinkers proposed to have a chapter on dissenting opinions to foster empathy among citizens and ensure the representation of opinions in future decision-making. And may I bring this question to Florence Gaub, who is with us, who's been very actively working on Foresight, EU's foreign and security policy as well. And could we hear your takes, Florence, on that? How feasible do you find it to basically achieve this big task, also by the digital tool, COCTEAU, that our young thinkers just proposed?
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me today. Also, of course, good morning to Vice President. So I've taken a lot of notes on all of the groups, and I'm also too happy to share them by email because I won't have time to address all of them. But as you just rightly said, I'm a Foresighter, so I'll respond to your question or share my observations with two hats on. On the one hand, the intimate knowledge I have on Foresight, but on the other also being an EU official. So I think it's the two that go together. Perhaps we start with the first problem, which is the EU. The EU is arguably one of the greatest things we have done, if not the greatest thing, since the end of World War II. But we've only managed to achieve it by elaborating a very complex system that makes space for all kinds of opinions. And this is why, I think the idea just presented on, having a national, let's say, a right of initiative, a European right of initiative, if you have a lot of citizens from different countries, why not? The problem is when we get into numbers, our system, it's not a democratic deficit. It's by definition the interpretation of democracy that tries to go away from the numbers. Because if it was all about the numbers, the Germans would always win and every decision would be German. So the winner takes it all aspect of democracy. The EU deliberately works around that because we wouldn't be friends with each other if it was just the majority that took all the decisions. So, you have to have this balance between the different parliaments, the European Parliament, the national parliaments. You have to have the member states in the council. You have to have the commission as an executive body, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, this is also the problem. This also creates distance because it's not easy to understand. And I think the proposals on explaining that better all highlight that there is a need to explain it a lot better. But trust me, from the inside, it's not to confuse people, it's to keep peace. To have all the opinions in the room. So how do we take dissenting opinions into account? My experience is that a lot of what the EU does, 80% of the time, the Vice President will confirm this, is hammer out a consensus, trying to take all the opinions on board. So I think that we're already a body that is accommodating as much opinion as possible, which is, again, why there's so much frustration. Because if you rock up in Brussels with a great idea, trust me, my experience is that what comes into the machine here never comes out looking the same when it comes out at the end. It's a sausage factory. So this brings me this idea of dissenting opinion. The real question that came to my mind while I was listening to you was, and that's, of course, the problem of our time, how do we live with opinions that aren't just different from mine, but that cannot live with mine? So this is my question to the group. How do you define dissenting opinion? If we, for instance, if we had a discussion about migration and I'm happy with every migrant that comes to Europe and somebody else says, well, I only want a certain percentage per year, we can find something. We can find common ground in the middle. But if you have somebody who says 0 migrants and somebody says all the migrants, there is no middle ground. So is this a dissenting opinion or is this actually polarization? And this is, I think, a question I would have to the group. How, in your scenario, do you deal with polarization? Polarization isn't just dissent, it is mutually exclusive. We see that gap widening, and also that reminds me actually of group 3, because we haven't been able to talk in detail about group 3, but it's the same question. What do we do if the beauty of digitalization actually creates more problem? Because you mentioned it, you hinted at it in your presentation, that we all live in our bubbles. Well, this is actually putting it gently, because what we see is that it's pretty shocking that all of us, you and I and everybody in here, has become more radical simply because we talk to people that are exactly like ourselves, and we confirm that we, with our liberal worldview, certainly we are the best. We are much less inclined to listen to others. And I think it starts by recognizing that we are part of the problem. So how do we deal with that? I think I'm all for, including a chapter on dissenting opinions on other proposals, but I want to know, how do you address these two aspects? Number one, what do you do if the opinions are basically, screw the EU and abolish all of this? Do you also want to have that in a chapter? Or is it about dissenting opinions in terms of other concrete ideas? Which actually, the first question I wrote down was technocrats take decisions and topics are excluded from political debate. I would also like to know which topics do you mean? Because I have a feeling this is a COVID question. Is it about health? Because as I just said, I find that in Europe, and my VP just said that, all we do is actually debate and try to find that consensus, which, trust me, I work on the Middle East. A lot of the time they say, why do you guys talk so much? So I'll end on that note, but congratulations to all 4 of you. And Tinatin, I will perhaps write down all my comments for all the 4 groups so I can share that by email. Thanks.
This is so useful. Thank you so much, Florence. I knew you would come with all these insightful comments exactly because of your expertise. And I think that now I don't want to add up my own questions. I think the questions raised by Florence are already straightforward. So let us go to the final group, group 4. Could you tell us more about the how do you define dissenting opinions? How do you find a mutual the ground between polarization, which is mutually exclusive debate, and dissenting opinions? And you can feel free also to address the other questions that Florence raised in his her comments.
Yeah, so I would like to say that actually I think this is what our proposal is about the problem with polarization, that now, as I said, we may have separate debates and we would like to have one debate where people of different opinions can meet. And we can't first on offline meetings where really people meet and can see each other, go out of those online bubbles and talk and be exposed to different opinions, then engage with them. And this is also what we believe COCTEAU, prepared by CEPS, does, because their people are really exposed to opinions that are different from theirs, and they have to engage with them. So it's not just only gathering opinions and voting which one gets more votes, but also talking to each other and giving my opinion to somebody else's opinion. And I think this is a huge value. And about technocrats taking more and more decisions, I heard also members of the European Commission saying that they really have a lot of discretion in, I think, Stability and Growth Pact. For example, there is a lot of discretion by technocrats. Then you have the European Central Bank, which also has a lot of discretion, which is outside really political control, and so on. So I think we agree with your remarks, and this is what we tried to address. Maybe somebody else from my group wants to add something.
If I may add to the issue on polarization, I just wanted to say that I believe that many of the opinions, dissenting opinions, they also want to be acknowledged and heard. So with time, the more opinions are heard, the more they feel that they have been acknowledged and heard, maybe that will also help to reduce polarization in its way.
Many thanks for your comments. I see now the listening could actually be a good starting point to basically tackle this impossible mission to find a middle ground. And with this, I will also take the opportunity to ask group number 2, who didn't have a chance to, well, basically react to the comments of the vice president. I mean about the media, well, the grants for the citizen-led media. And as Florence already had a comment on their presentation, maybe this is a good moment to ask group number 2 if they want to react to the comments of the Vice President and Florence.
Yes, we just wanted to say something very clear. First of all, thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your really insightful feedback. We think that the important dilemma that we were dealing with in our scenario is really about this top-down versus bottom-up approach. The fact that a lot of communication and sort of legitimation initiatives can be made by the EU to engage citizens more, to make them more informed, and so on. And this is all extremely useful, but at the same time, often these top-down approaches will be perceived less, will have less legitimacy than citizen-led and bottom-up approaches. So this is why I think our approach is really aiming to bridge this too, by having something that is, of course, led by the EU, but then gives a level of independence to local actors, in this case, media projects, to be able to engage their own citizens in EU policymaking in some way. And if anybody else from my group would like to say something, then please go on.
I just wanted to add something shortly as well. Firstly, thank you for your comments to all the high-level speakers, Mr. Vice President and Ms. Gaub. I want to address one small aspect of it as well, with regards to, I think Ms. Gaub mentioned this, about how there are so many projects that the EU is doing and so many opportunities, but a lot of time people don't have an idea of what is present. And we think that our idea about the Citizen Media Initiative could help address this as well, because a lot of the time, local citizen media can help to draw attention to these more bigger projects that people just don't tend to notice very often. But if something pops up in your Twitter feed, if you see something on your favorite podcast, then you're much more likely to try to get involved in these sort of matters as well. That's all I want to add. Thank you for your time.
Many thanks, Serene. And I think with this, it's now time to use the final 15 minutes for the Q&A session. And why we want to do this, because, well, young thinkers are very happy to do their homework and to bring today their proposals. But they also would like to take this opportunity to meet with the Vice President and with distinguished academics, and to bring, to basically let us know other questions they had for today. And let me just invite with the questions. I already see the hands rising, and then let me invite Francisco Jose Lopez, who had a question to the Vice President on the conference on the future of Europe. Francisco?
Right. Thank you so much. Yeah, so my question is basically, so what are you expecting from the outcome of the conference of the future of Europe, and what institutional channels could be used to implement the ideas produced in the conference, as well as when it comes to the changing commission, for instance, in the coming years? How can we ensure that the outcome of this specific time, of this years, this months, is going to have a long-term impact? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francisco. Vice President, would you like to react?
Yes, of course, and thank you very much, Francisco, for that question, because it's very much coming to the gist of what we are debating this morning. I think the idea behind the Conference on Future of Europe was exactly what we are going to do, how we can re-energize, how we can reinvigorate the debate among the European citizens. How can we kind of bring more vigor into the public debates and into generating the new ideas and creating new possibilities, and create many new channels, how citizens can communicate with the European institutions. So what do I expect? Hopes that we'll have better, deeper, more intense debate among Europeans. Definitely, it's always better when this is citizens driven and citizens led, so we can really hear the genuine opinion coming from the citizens. So here is very much my support for this bottom-up approach, and therefore we try to make the organization of the events under the label of Conference on a Future as simple as possible. I mean, you have a meeting, you agree to some basic principles, you give us the summary, what actually you debated, what you would like us to change to do, and we of course work on it. You will get the response from our joint secretariat, and what would be then the consequence. And I think this was the question of Francisco. So for example, from my side, what can I promise you is that I will use my powers here in the Commission, because I'm responsible for coordinating of the Commission work program, that once the conference is concluded and we will see the main takeaways of this, what I hope will be this Grand Débat Européen, that we will translate it into the concrete or political or legislative proposals, which then we can put in the Commission's work program. And the idea to have the conference now and to have the main conclusions most probably under the French presidency is exactly for that purpose, that we would still have a time to process it, to transform it into the concrete programmatic issues, so we can include it into the Commission work program, and we will have also the time to work on them before the end of this legislature. So that's a little bit of the, the plan here, to have intense debate, bottom-up generated ideas, which we will then process, and each institutions will do its bit. But here it's quite clear that Commission will be key in putting some of the ideas into the Commission work program, which is then in the end the program of the all the institutions, because co-legislators are working very closely on this with us. So that's how we would like to do it, how we would like to bring it to the practice, and I hope that we will see the results of these discussions already the next year. Thank you.
Many thanks, Vice President. Yeah, we are very curious, and it's very good to learn about the plans on the conference on the future of Europe. And I see another question from young thinkers, Dario Moreira, who would also like to ask.
Selection of the president. You can say that in the past they committed exam to a candidate. I mean, but in the last time it was different. So for Ursula it was not like this, but before for Juncker, for instance.
Vice President, should you mute yourself?
Yeah, I didn't.
Thank you. So Dario Moreira, who had a question to the Vice President. Dario, the floor is yours.
So my question, a little provocative, is whether the EU Commission has a democratic deficit, whether you agree with that assessment, and how impactful would the introduction of a direct election for the President of the Commission be to overcome this? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would confirm and repeat what Florence has already said a few minutes ago, that we are, I would say, the most consensual organization in the world, probably. You know that indeed 80% of our time we are seeking the consensus, because this was the policy drive which served us until now very well. We want to have everyone on board, be it, I would say, in the Commission, if it comes to my colleague commissioners, but also in the legislative process. I was working before that in national capacity, and indeed on most of the proposals which been on the table, despite the fact if they've been decided by unanimity or by qualified majority, we've been always trying to accommodate all member states, big and small, north and south, to make sure that what we are agreeing upon is acceptable for everyone. And I think that you see the same efforts in the European Parliament. So indeed, we spend enormous amount of time on consulting, working on the consensus to make sure that once the decisions are taken, that they are supported by everyone. Therefore, very often the process is perceived as very lengthy one, sometimes very bureaucratic, and the reason for that in most cases is that we are really doing our utmost to achieve the consensus. I have to say, though, that the difference is quite big if you know that there will be the qualified majority voting than unanimity, because then everyone is kind of negotiating in a different way, because they know that if they insist on something which is really out of the remit, that they will not have in the end the possibility to block the whole process, and are much more cooperative. And therefore, I think that in the end, the consensus driven by the fact that it would be decided by the QMV, it's much faster and much more agile. So if it comes to the democratic deficit, I think that we are very democratic institutions. Everyone in the college went through, many of us, through many elections, the same with all the ministers who are representing the governments, the same about the European Parliament, where MEPs are directly elected. And I think that why this perception of distance and the perception of lack of democratic credentials or the democratic deficit is there, because indeed the process is a rather complex one. It's not easy to follow, but to a certain extent, if I look at the big federal states, also it's not that easy to comprehend them as well. But what I think here we should do and we could do is indeed to be much better in presenting what we do in simpler terms. I think communication was mentioned many times in this morning. The outreach to the citizens, presenting our views, taking the suggestions on board. I think it's a key, and very often when I also look through our communication materials, I see that we have to improve how to present the story to our citizens, so they would understand in concrete examples why this or that legislation or why this or that political decision was taken. If it comes to the direct election of the president, as you know, we tested the Spitzen candidate proposal. This is how Jean-Claude Juncker was elected. We have seen that there was also the attempt to do it the second time. This time it didn't work because in the end the European Council, so the head of states and president, decided otherwise. How much it would bring the more attention to the process, I think it would. At the same time, when I looked at the debate in the last European Parliament elections, usually this was the mostly debated and hot topic in the countries from where the Spitzen candidates been the origin of. So that was, I think, that the topic in these countries. But this is one of the issues which is, of course, very hotly debated in the European Union. It's one of the issues which I'm sure will be again tackled on under the, I would say, interinstitutional topics, which is covered by the Conference on Future of Europe. And we will see also what is the perception of the citizens, how important it is for them, and then to decide how to proceed further also with this proposal. Thank you.
Many thanks, Vice President, for this very comprehensive response. I hope young thinkers are now satisfied to hearing your opinions. And let us go now a bit a bit wider on the European continent. And let me give the floor to Ellen Schiffer, who had a question to Florence Gaub on the EU's neighborhood. Ellen, floor is yours.
Thank you, Tina. Yes, so I mean, a lot of the crisis that we have seen over the last couple of years has been in the EU's neighbors, such as Belarus and Ukraine, which we sometimes do not see coming. So this led me to ask, are we better at foresight on a more global level than we are in our own neighborhood or our own region? And if not, what can we do to improve this? Or maybe you disagree with me. I would love to hear what you think.
Thanks for your question, Eileen. So I have two questions for you. Who is we and who didn't see it coming? So we've had a whole discussion over the last year about whether COVID-19 was a black swan or not. You know, a black swan is a completely unpredictable event and nobody saw it coming. So the thing is that for me, COVID was not unpredictable because we hinted it in the Global Trends report. We didn't say a big crisis will come, but we did say pandemics are becoming increasingly likely. That said, you might not have read that report. You might not have known that a lot of scientific people were warning of a pandemic. So for you, it was a black swan, but for me, it wasn't. And the same goes for, I would say, for this type of crisis, because you know, for instance, I work on the Middle East and North Africa. I've been writing since 2017. There will be more unrest. In 2019, there was more unrest. My colleague working on Russia, the Eastern neighborhood, he's been saying, you know, Belarus, Ukraine, etc., all the time. So the problem is not that we don't see things coming. You will always find somebody who then also on Twitter says, I saw it coming, myself included, because we're very proud. Okay, great, we saw it coming, but what good does it do if nobody was listening to us? So I think where we're really good at foresight, you will never even hear the crisis coming, because there's lots of instances. Okay, you have the dramatic ones like terrorist attacks that are then being, how do you say, they're being, well, prevented from happening. But it's even smaller things like, I don't know, a financial crisis, or, you know, there's loads of measures that are being taken before the crisis actually happened. So I think it's always a bit of a distorted view. We only look at the things that surprise us, you or me indeed. Obviously, we can never have total knowledge of everything. Then I think what you want to know is, we as in the European officials, how surprised were they about Belarus, about Ukraine, about the Arab Spring? And I would say that perhaps as a collective, there's always a dimension of surprise at the scale of things, at the detail of things, but normally a crisis doesn't come completely out of nowhere. If you have a fight with your partner, you will know that maybe the instance of the fight and the degree of anger is surprising, but you know, both of you know that there's been things brewing under the surface. So I would say that actually we're overall pretty good. And look at China rising. We've been saying China's been rising for 20 years, so no surprise there. Pandemic, unfortunately, no surprise there. And even I would like to tell Group 1, the fear of the power of big tech, it's in the 2012, the first Global Trends report already mentioned. So I think actually we're not doing too badly, but you can never predict anything. You can never see everything coming because you're just a human being and you will look at the future and the world with your priorities in mind. So I do think that actually we're doing pretty good on Foresight. But the question is, where are we, who are we, and what are we looking at, and what surprises us in the end?
If you allow me, Tina, just to complement excellent answer of Florence, the issue here is how to put all these bright Foresight minds together and make Foresight strategic. Strategic, it means that it's practical, politically relevant, and that we establish the channels that the decision makers, the political levels would actually listen to it. Because I totally agree with Florence on all the major events which been kind of which has shaken the Europe to the core. We can talk about financial meltdown. We can talk about migration crisis of COVID-19. Indeed, the Foresight has been spot on. But there was not that channel to bring this, let's call it inconvenient truth, you know, to the top political bodies. Because I mean, if you are, I mean, in this decision-making seats, every day you have to deal with a lot of things. You are very much concerned by day-to-day business, by the next elections, by, you know, the mini crises which are popping here and there. And therefore, I think, and I hope that at least during this legislature, we can put the Foresight at the level of strategic tool, that we would establish the proper network. I'm very glad that thanks to Portuguese presidencies, we established so-called group of ministers for the future. It means that in each government there should be kind of outlet channel where we will be able to kind of present the latest horizon scanning, or, you know, global scenarios, or the things that the Foresight community feels that are important, that they should be known on the top level to act in kind of preventing, preparatory and anticipatory way. And I think that's much more difficult to do than say, but I think only once we achieve that mechanism for alert triggering, then we can say that we are actually using to the fullest our Foresight community, and we are making the strategic Foresight, the Foresight actually strategic, because we are acting upon the advice and we are preparing for what could be the possible outcomes. Because of course we all knew that something will happen in Belarus. Nobody was surprised how the you know, election results would be suppressed by the regime. The thing with the plane, it was one of the many accidents to happen, and therefore here indeed there was no surprise, and we know, I mean, what is the tendency. But I mean, to be able to kind of be better master of anticipating what could be the future potential black swan events, and to prepare Europe better for these eventualities, I think that's a big task we have to accomplish together. Thank you.
Many thanks, Vice President, for complimenting. It's very interesting to hear views on that. But I'm afraid we are, well, running out of time, and our speakers have very busy agendas, so we have to let them go. So let me wrap up. Well, we brought together today, this morning, lots of important questions, and I'm happy that I think we are leaving even more questions than we had in the morning. That's the idea, to have very thought-provoking debate. And I think this proved once more that the recommendations and proposals presented by young thinkers definitely deserves to be finalized into the report, which we will contribute to the conference on the future of Europe. With this, let me say big thanks to young thinkers for their hard work over the past week. First to CEPS, leading the work on global governance trigger, which gave the base to young thinkers to build their scenarios. And great thanks to CEPS partners, Isinova, Politecnico Milano, for guiding Foresight sessions for our specially selected young thinkers. Well, great thanks to our excellent speakers for their time, and big thanks to all the participants in the Ideas Lab, our audience on YouTube, all our followers on social media. Well, today's event is nearing the end, but Young Thinkers Initiative at CEPS will continue. So stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, goodbye, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.